Today we're going to figure out what Bitcoins are, where do they come from, how do you use them, the potential security risks of Bitcoins. So, you've probably heard that Bitcoins are a secret currency. They're associated with Silk Road. They're associated with illegal transactions, but they're associated with many legitimate transactions where the buyer and the seller want to remain anonymous, both from themselves and from prying eyes. So when you go to the store or on eBay or on Amazon or wherever and you make a purchase, the seller knows who you are and you know who the seller is, and the banks and the credit card companies and the web hosts and the internet service providers know who you are and who the seller is. And sometimes you want to make a purchase and stay anonymous. You don't want your credit card company to know what you're buying, or you don't want the seller to know who you are. It might be something embarrassing. Let's say maybe you wanted to buy some kind of medication or something. So Bitcoins allow the buyer and the seller to remain anonymous. So where do Bitcoins come from? Well, normally US currency is printed by the Treasury, and they print as much money as they want. But Bitcoins don't come from a central source. It's more complicated than that. So basically every Bitcoin is a solution to a math equation. But there's one catch. You can only solve one Bitcoin at a time. So when Bitcoins first started, there was only one Bitcoin. If we call that a Bitcoin number 1, then the Bitcoin number 1 was used as a question to solve Bitcoin number 2. Bitcoin number 2 was used as a question to solve Bitcoin number 3. And this has been going on and on and on forever. So basically, every time a Bitcoin is solved or identified, then that Bitcoin is used to find the next Bitcoin. So the questions get harder, and the reason the questions get harder is because computing power increases. So your computer a year ago or 2 years ago wasn't as powerful as your computer now. So the system is designed so that one Bitcoin is solved every 10 minutes. And the Bitcoin problem is a very complicated math equation that your computer solves. So the idea is that the average computer can figure out a Bitcoin every 10 minutes. Or not the average computer, but a pretty powerful computer. So if you think about it, like Bitcoin number 1000 is a much more complicated math problem than Bitcoin number 1 or 2. So there's a whole bunch of choices for Bitcoin mining hardware. You can see they range in price. There's some cheap USB sticks that can do it, and there's some actual computers. They're not computers that you would play games on. Some of them are pretty expensive, like a few $1,000s, and they're designed just to mine Bitcoins. Their hardware is perfectly configured to run the algorithm. So in order to have Bitcoins, you need to have a Bitcoin wallet. And a wallet is basically a bunch of letters and numbers that are cryptographically secure. So you create a wallet with a unique address, and then anybody can send Bitcoins to your address. But only you can pay Bitcoins from your wallet. And the reason is, when you send Bitcoins out of your wallet, you have to digitally sign the transaction. So if we've got a buyer here, and she's created a wallet with the ID 54321. Of course, in real life, the wallet IDs are much longer and more complicated, but you don't actually have to remember them. And she's secured her wallet with these secret keys that only she knows. And she's also created a public key, which allows the world to know that that's her wallet. When she wants to create a transaction, she signs it with her secret key, and the world can verify that the transaction came from her because they can use the public key to check. We're not going to get into the details of how this encryption works right now, but there's another video you can check out on public key cryptography and the Diffie-Hellman key exchange if you're interested. But basically, you just need to know that she has a wallet here. Now, we've got a seller who's got her own wallet, 98765, and we've got the ledger. And the ledger is a computer that keeps track of every Bitcoin wallet and what the contents of each wallet are. It doesn't keep track of transactions. And there are actually thousands of computers that are volunteering to be ledgers, and they all keep track of the same data. And they're all over the world and they're decentralized, so it's pretty difficult to defraud the ledger. So, as I said, every Bitcoin has a unique ID, and the ledger keeps track of which wallet contains which Bitcoins. It's kind of like the bank saying, I know which bills you have in your account and the serial numbers, but not keeping track of who paid who. So, when the buyer wants to buy something from the seller, she asks for some product, and the seller gives her the price, and the seller gives her the wallet ID. So, the buyer creates a transaction and signs it with her digital signature, basically saying, I'm going to send 1 Bitcoin to the seller's wallet. And this transaction request goes to the ledger. And the ledger says, hey, I got a transaction request. At the same time, the buyer tells the seller, hey, I sent you this Bitcoin. So as I said, the ledgers are distributed all over the United States and Canada and Europe, and there are thousands of ledgers. So just because the transaction went to, let's say, the ledger number 4, the ledger number 4 relays this information to its nearby ledgers and lets them know, and they relay this information to their ledgers. So the seller calls up the ledger to make sure that the Bitcoin's in her wallet. And the ledger says it's in her wallet. So the ledger knows that Bitcoin number 78 moved from the buyer's wallet to the seller's wallet. So the seller's happy, and she sends a product to the buyer. Of course, this can be tricked because there are many ledgers and they don't all update at the same time. So on average it takes about 10 to 30 minutes for all the ledgers to reflect the transaction. So if you were a sneaky buyer, you could use the same Bitcoin more than once. And how do you do that? Well, you create a transaction, you send it to one ledger telling it, say, send Bitcoin 78 to wallet 55543, and you send the same transaction to a different ledger but telling it to spend the same Bitcoin to a different wallet. So now ledger 3 thinks it's sending Bitcoin 78 to 98765, and ledger 4 thinks it's sending Bitcoin 78 to 55543. And the problem with that is now the ledgers have different information. They don't agree. So eventually these ledgers will all reconcile with each other and figure out who's correct. and they'll all have the same data. But in the 10 minutes to 30 minutes that they're updating, the ledgers have different information. So the sellers both think they got paid, and they could ship the product before it's too late. So the sellers are trying to figure out. The sellers are both happy, and then they're both shipping product to the buyer. And then what happens is the ledger tells the other ledger what's up, and now the first ledger is confused. And what happens in this case is all the ledgers in the world get together and figure out which transaction is correct, and they all agree on which transaction is correct, and that's the one that stays. Everybody else has to update their records. So if you're a seller and you want to prevent this kind of fraud, what you would do is you would wait 10 to 30 minutes before releasing the bitcoins, or before releasing the product. You would make sure that your transaction is confirmed by more than one ledger. So yeah, you need to be patient to avoid Bitcoin fraud. That's the #1 way. And Bitcoins have been doing very well over the last year or so. They've been flat, but they were just at a few dollars, and then in September of last year they totally shot up about $1,000, and then they kind of flatlined to about 400 in April, and they've been creeping up ever since. So there are people who have made millions and millions of dollars on Bitcoins in the last few years. And many people accept Bitcoins now. Microsoft, Expedia, Netflix. So the #1 way to protect yourself from fraud is to keep your secret keys secret. If you're a buyer or a seller or whoever you are, if you've got a Bitcoin wallet, don't tell anybody what your secret keys are, because if somebody has your secret keys, they can create a transaction and spend your Bitcoins by sending them to another wallet. And once they're gone, they're gone. You can't file a charge back, you can't complain, there's nothing you can do. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, leave a comment and we'll answer them. Thank you.